Hi everyone, Amy here with my final comments on our final discussion of the semester, so it's kind of a sad day for me. I have really enjoyed our discussions all semester long, so I appreciate all your hard work and thoughtfulness and willingness to share and kind of push the issues as you commented and responded to each other through this platform. So I think it's been a really good course overall, and I appreciate everyone's hard work with that. So most of what I'm going to talk about today has to do with what I saw in your reflections in terms of revision planning, and also a couple of good reflections I saw that reflected some advice on how to use the other course materials, for example, the textbook, to increase your understanding of the concepts to apply to your argument essays. And let me just say, too, that I think everybody is really on the right track. You have more or less work to do, as you know, based on the feedback you got from your discussion this last week. But I think in general, everybody is, like I said, really going the right direction. And I think as long as you have a good understanding of what you need to do, I think it's all doable for all of you. I want to see you do that revision work over this weekend, but I think in general, I think it's a very attainable goal for everyone. All of you are definitely on the right track with that. So I also appreciate your hard work there, and I'm excited to read your arguments because this is probably, as I think I've said before, my favorite essay to grade. It's just really interesting, and I get to kind of get fired up about these issues too, so that's fun for me. Okay, so like I said, I did see a couple of reflections that offered a really good plan for how the writer was going to approach their revision this week, and I wanted to applaud that and really call it out as an example, because when you go forward into your future writing classes, like for example English 122, or if you transfer somewhere else, that plan for what the revision is going to entail is such a crucial part of the writing process. I know so many people think, well, I'm just going to go straight from the feedback I get in workshop and it's magically going to assimilate into my draft. Well, that's kind of wishful thinking, I think, and it doesn't really happen that way in reality. So I think as long as you can kind of sit down and take a moment and reflect on the feedback you got, maybe what was useful, what wasn't useful, if there's anything you possibly even don't agree with, and then what are the actual changes that you need to make, kind of like a to-do list, so that when you sit down to execute your revision, you're actually applying the changes that will improve your work in the way that your reviewer suggested. So, okay, let me pull these up here. So this person said, for my revisions, I'm going to do a little revision to grammar along with reworking a few paragraphs to make some of them a little clearer. And I think one point I made may have been offensive, so I'm going to change that to make it not so offensive sounding. Along with what Amy said, I do agree that my counter argument should only be one paragraph and that it interrupts the flow of my thesis. I'm going to try and condense my counter argument into one paragraph and expand on a couple of my points. Okay, so this may seem like a pretty quick reflection, but there's actually a pretty complex list of things that need to be done in revision kind of embedded in here. And it's interesting because this person kind of meanders through what those ideas are and lists them almost in order of opposite importance. So starting with grammar, clarity and things like that, and then going more into the substance of the argument. When in fact, I think if we stepped away from this here, we could all see that the things that are relating to the structure of the paragraphs are a little bit more important. So that's a good example of why having a plan is such a good idea, because here you've gotten it out on paper first, and you can look and say, okay, well, here's the list. Let me prioritize it now. Okay, I'm going to start with making my counter argument one paragraph, because that seems to be like the biggest thing that's interrupting my thesis. I do need to expand on a couple of my points, and I have this one point that's a little bit offensive, so that's pretty important too. And then I can go into the clarity, and then probably the grammar would be the last thing. If you sat down to revise without creating this revision plan, you might sit down and just start with the grammar. And then if you procrastinated, you might run out of time, and you're never even going to get to the thing that is at the end of your initial list, but that really is the most important. So it's almost like a rough draft of your revision process. You're going to make a list here that isn't exactly the order that you will ultimately follow, but it gives you a general sense of what needs to be done, and then you can tweak it from there. Okay, so here's another good revision plan. I have a few things to work on to make the paper better. I can expand more on my introduction of coal and the history of which in the United States in my opening paragraph. I am going to work on my citations because I do not think they're quite right yet. Also, in my body paragraphs, I need to make the introductory sentences more relevant to how my points are worded in my thesis statement. There are a few grammatical errors I need to correct as well. Some of my evidence I presented in my body paragraphs are in the wrong places within the paragraph too, so I could definitely improve on organization to make the paper flow even better. Okay, so again, this is a good example of a kind of meandering, almost stream of consciousness reflection on what needs to be done in the revision, but you can really pick out and prioritize the tasks that need to be implemented in order to improve the essay here. So expanding the introduction, that's one thing. Working on citations, that's another thing. Topic sentences and making them match the wording of the thesis, that's another thing. Grammatical errors and evidence. So that's like 1, 2, 3, 4 things. 3, 4, 5 things. I would put, again, grammatical errors at the end. This one here, make the topic sentences of your paragraphs match how the points are worded in your thesis. That, I would say, is probably the most important thing. All of you should do that. Try to echo the language of your thesis as you're introducing each main point in your topic sentences. Sometimes I call those buzzwords. They're kind of the words that you use to clue your reader in, okay, now I'm talking about this particular point from my thesis. It's kind of a organizational strategy to help your reader follow along more easily. So that to me is very important. Obviously, citations are pretty important as well. Background information in the introduction is important, but not nearly as important as the thesis, reasons, and evidence kinds of things. So another really good plan here. And then another thing I was really excited and pleased to see in the discussion, particularly the reflections this week, was that several of you were referring back to the textbook and the other materials from the course that influenced your work in the rough draft discussion this week. So that was very rewarding, I guess, or inspiring to me, because I hope that I've structured the course in a way that every week you have a set of materials that go together and help improve your understanding of what you need to do for the essay you're working on. And so the connections are clear to me because I obviously designed the course and have a very in-depth and, detailed understanding of the material. But to someone who's new to the material or someone who doesn't live in my brain and see how I organize things, it might not be the same. So I was very pleased to see that there are at least some of you who are able to see why I put things together and how I hope what you're reading about in the book is influential in terms of what you need to execute in your writing. And I always hope that the book is at least somewhat relevant to the course. So this was good for me to see. So this person says, I would encourage anyone that is struggling with nailing down the main argument or points to be presented with their paper or are questioning the strength of their thesis statement to do the exercise in our book on page 594 called Exercise for Nutshelling Your Argument. Awesome. This is a very good exercise. It's the kind of thing I would have time to do in a face-to-face course if we were all sitting together in a classroom 3 times a week. But with the way we have to run discussions to get everyone to have some flexibility and when they can respond to each other, you can't do as many activities. So this is a very good activity that I would definitely encourage everyone to practice with on their own. So this is a walkthrough exercise in which you will answer questions about your topic, your main points for which you would like to present, what your expectation is for the audience before and after your paper, the purpose for your argument, and several other questions that will act as a guide in illustrating how strong your thesis may or may not be. It helped me tremendously in realizing what I was really trying to argue, the how's, the why, and what I hoped others would gain from it. One other thing I found helpful was a passage on page 599 about the importance of a good title. Thinking about your title forces you to nutshell your ideas by seeing your project's big picture. This is just so insightful, I can't not comment here. It causes you to reconsider your purpose, to think about What's old and what's new for your audience? This speaks to the use of old before new. I found this especially interesting because in the examples that were given, it put me in the shoes of the reader rather than the author. And I related to reading on a subject that I had some knowledge on and obviously already had the interest, but was very interested in learning how the new information on the topic might educate or influence my opinion on the issue. So this is just profound. As a teacher, this is such an in-depth understanding of the material, like going so much further than just reading the book. This is a true synthesis of the information and application to this person's own writing. So just brilliant right here. It causes you to reconsider your purpose and think about what's old and what's new for your audience. Put it in the shoes of the reader rather than the author. If I get you guys to take away one thing from this English 121 class this semester, it is that as a writer, you need to put yourself in the shoes of the reader, not in your own shoes. Because you do, like I said before, live in your own head and everything in your head makes sense to you. But you have to convey that to your reader through your writing, and that's the challenge we have here. And so you're never going to understand their perspective until you can put yourself in their perspective. So I think as a writer, when you can learn that lesson and really let go of your own perspective, it is so liberating and it will just open up new worlds for your writing. So I really encourage you to try to let go and really see things from your audience's point of view. And then again here, I will be using the feedback from this week's discussion by my peers and the comments from the teacher, as well as the information from the book Strategies for Writing in Closed Form Prose in reworking and improving my paper. It also helped me reading the instructor's feedback to each student to improve our writing. So this was good to hear just because I hope what I offered you guys was helpful. This is such an important assignment. I really wanted to make sure I did that for every one of you this time. And of course, this section in the book is extremely applicable here because this is what you're writing, closed form prose. It is an academic essay. Don't forget you know your citations, your third person voice, a level of formality, a structure, an organizational structure that's focused on a hierarchy based on your thesis. So always connecting back to your proposal as you move in and out of every single point paragraph, and things like that will all kind of play into that closed form genre, and you'll be following those conventions that your audience will be expecting. So again, it goes back to putting it in the shoes of the audience. You're writing for an academic audience, and so you are writing closed form prose because that's what they expect. And if you violate those expectations, they're going to be confused and they're going to start to maybe feel alienated from your writing, and you will be much less likely to be able to persuade them. So that goes for everything from grammar to citations to organization, you know, how you're bringing in your evidence to support your argument, how you're working your thesis in through the whole essay, and basically everything that goes into your paper. And then I did also almost forget, I wanted to mention that this point about a title is really interesting. Titles are a very effective way to introduce your reader to the issue that you're addressing, and then subtitles you can even use to kind of allude to your actual position on that issue. So if you state the issue and then have your subtitle be some variation on what your position is, you can even do that with your research question for the title and then your answer to the research question for your subtitle. That's a very conventional way to approach a title in academic writing. However, I do think this person makes a really good point that in addition to kind of adding something to your paper, to your argument, it does force you to think about your argument in a different way. It forces you to kind of really break it down to the nitty-gritty in terms of like what is the controversy here and where do I stand. And so you know, then you can expound on that to form your true comprehensive thesis, because sometimes I think when people give a thesis, they're actually giving a nutshell, and the thesis actually needs to have all of those points in there. So if you use your title as your nutshell, you actually can have both, and you run the risk, or you're less likely to run the risk of not including everything that needs to be in your thesis. So if any of this is confusing, or if you still have questions about what you need to be doing to execute the closed form prose conventions, please do email me. I'm getting down to the end of the week, but I am going to be sending feedback to those of you who have already asked me, hopefully today. So I wish you all very good luck as you work on revising these papers. Don't forget they're due Sunday night. Is that right? Let me double check real quick here. Okay, that's probably good to know. Let's see. And that would be, oh no, Friday. Okay, let me double check that up. I think I'm going to extend those to Sunday, so I'll put something up on D2L about that. All right, thanks guys. Have a good weekend.